It's a quiet evening on a suburban street when a white police officer pulls over a black woman for what seems like a routine traffic stop. The officer approaches her car with authority, ready to take control of the situation. He asks for her license and registration, his tone firm but professional. The woman, calm and composed, hands over her documents without hesitation. There's something about her demeanor, confidence perhaps, that catches the officer off guard. As the interaction unfolds, he begins to sense that this is no ordinary driver. Little does he know, the woman sitting before him is no ordinary citizen. She holds a title he never expected. When the truth comes out, the balance of power in this encounter shifts dramatically. What happens next will challenge perceptions and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this kind of moment. As the officers approached, there was an uneasy silence in the air. The general stood tall, his military uniform crisp, and his eyes locked with theirs. He had served in numerous conflicts, led countless missions, but today was different. The tension in the street was thick, almost suffocating. The crowd around them was murmuring, unsure of what was happening, but all senses were heightened. There was something off about this moment, something that didn't sit right with anyone involved. The officers hesitated, their hands twitching at their sides, clearly unsure how to proceed with the arrest. Was it their orders they were questioning, or the man they were trying to apprehend? There was an undeniable shift in the atmosphere, one that could only be described as distrust, a feeling that had been building for months. Rumors had been circulating about the general's actions, but nothing concrete had come to light. Was this really just about the law, or was there something more at play here, something darker? The unanswered questions loomed, and no one seemed to know what would happen next. As the general stood motionless, the murmurs from the crowd grew louder. Some were on his side, whispering that he was being wronged, while others quietly wondered if the officers were right to question him. The general had always been known for his strong stance on justice, yet today it seemed like the very laws he fought for were being used against him. But why? Was it truly an act of defiance, or was there more to this situation than met the eye? The officers exchanged uneasy glances, one of them glancing back at their superior, a seasoned officer who had dealt with countless confrontations. His face was unreadable, but it was clear that even he was uncertain. The general had a reputation, and it wasn't just for his leadership. There were rumors about his involvement in controversial operations, some that were never fully explained. Those stories had circulated in hushed tones in government circles, but no one had ever confirmed or acted on them, until now. Behind the scenes, the general's allies were scrambling. A few had already started making calls, trying to figure out if this was an elaborate setup or if his own past had finally caught up with him. People he once trusted were now staying silent, unwilling to risk their own positions. Meanwhile, those with grudges against him, whether personal or political, were starting to circle, seeing an opportunity to bring him down. Across town, a journalist who had been tracking the general's every move received an anonymous tip. The tip hinted that the general's recent actions might have been a deliberate attempt to provoke the system, a risky play that would either secure his power or destroy him. The journalist hesitated. Was this a story worth pursuing, or was it just more smoke and mirrors? But with everything escalating, the truth seemed elusive, and the stakes kept rising. Back at the scene, the general's posture stiffened. His hands were at his sides, but the weight of the situation pressed on him. He wasn't just a man on trial, he was a symbol. The officers were still uncertain whether to move in, the tension between authority and defiance palpable. What had started as a simple arrest had now become a high-stakes standoff, one that could alter the course of many lives, if not the nation itself. The general knew it. He could feel the pull of history, of every decision leading to this moment. But what was his next move? Could he talk his way out of this? Or would his past actions finally force him into a corner, one with no way out? The general's mind raced as the tension in the air thickened. His eyes never left the officers, but his thoughts were elsewhere, flashing back to the countless decisions, the covert meetings, and the alliances that had shaped his rise to power. He had been warned that a day like this might come, a moment when everything would spiral out of control, but no warning had ever prepared him for this. The flashing lights of police cars, the murmuring crowd, the weight of their eyes on him, it all felt like the final act of a play he had written but never rehearsed. In the distance, sirens began to wail, their shrill sound growing louder. Was it reinforcements for the officers? Was it his allies coming to his aid? Or was it something darker, a sign that things were about to escalate far beyond his control? The general could feel the eyes of everyone around him on his every movement. They were waiting for him to speak, to make a move. He had always been a man of action, but now it felt as though every decision was being scrutinized, dissected. One of the officers stepped forward, his hand hovering near his sidearm. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor underneath. "General, step aside. You need to come with us." It was a command, but it lacked conviction. The officer's eyes betrayed him, flicking nervously back to his superior, unsure of the consequences of such a bold move. The general didn't flinch. Instead, he stood tall, his gaze piercing. His voice, when it came, was calm but firm, cutting through the noise around them. "You don't understand," he said, his words carrying weight. "This isn't just about me. This is bigger than you, bigger than me. If you arrest me now, you'll unleash something that no one can stop. I've seen it, I know it, and you won't be able to hide from the truth." The words hung in the air, chilling the already tense atmosphere. There was a momentary pause, an unspoken question that seemed to echo between the officers. Did they want to risk it? Did they want to be part of something much larger than they were prepared for? In the crowd, whispers spread like wildfire. Some cheered the general on, urging him to stand his ground, while others took a step back, unsure of what was happening. A few cameras flashed, capturing the scene, but even the media couldn't hide the unease that was rippling through the city. Outside forces were closing in, and no one was sure whose side the truth was on anymore. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt nearby. A man in a dark suit emerged, flanked by a couple of well-dressed individuals. The sight of him sent a ripple through the crowd. Everyone recognized him. He was a political figure known for his power and influence. His appearance in the midst of this chaos was no coincidence. Was he there to negotiate, to intervene, or was he there to make the situation worse? The general's heart pounded in his chest. His past, the choices he had made, were all catching up with him. Every person who had a hand in his rise, every deal he'd struck, was suddenly under scrutiny. The web of alliances, secrets, and lies was closing in around him. No matter which way he moved, it felt as if something was about to snap, something he couldn't control. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure if it would be the law that took him down, or something far more dangerous. The officer took a step forward, and the crowd held its breath. Every second stretched, drawn out in a silence that felt like the calm before an impending storm. The officer stepped forward, his fingers now resting on the grip of his weapon. The crowd was silent, a heavy stillness that made it feel as though time had frozen. The general's eyes flickered toward the man in the suit, who was now walking slowly toward him. It wasn't just the officer's move that made the general tense. It was the look in the politician's eyes. That knowing, calculating gaze. The same one that had always watched him from afar, never quite an ally, but never quite an enemy either. Then, without warning, the man in the suit raised his hand, signaling to the officers. The tension in the air thickened, but no one expected what came next. With a swift motion, he pulled out a phone from his jacket pocket, dialed a number, and spoke in a low voice. The words were unclear, but the shift in the crowd was instant. Murmurs of confusion spread like wildfire as the general felt the weight of something shifting beneath him. Before he could react, the unmistakable sound of a helicopter cut through the air. It was so close, so sudden, that people around them jumped. The powerful thrum of the blades seemed to freeze everyone in place. The helicopter hovered above, casting a shadow over the street. The general's heart raced. This was no ordinary police action. No, this felt planned, calculated.